Get my share going here. All right, so yeah, I'm excited to be included in such a rad group of people. So thanks for the invite. As Sunil mentioned, I'm a senior research scientist in the Autodesk Robotics Lab, which is part of Autodesk Research. And in general, our robotics research team is tasked with exploring the technologies and trends that we think will impact the future of automation. And we do that through a lot of hands-on design projects and experimentation. That's everything from metal 3D printing that you see here to digital twins, machine learning control, to architectural scale fabrication. But today I'm going to talk about a project we released actually, I think it was 2018 now, called Mimic. No relation to NVIDIA's Deep Mimic. But the story of Mimic actually starts about 7 years ago with Bot and Dolly. I had just started working at Autodesk when they released Box, and it really captured my imagination. I have that sort of like flashbulb memory about it. I remember exactly where I was and when I watched Box for the first time. And Bot and Dolly proved to me, at least, that industrial robots could be used for these new applications on film sets, live entertainment, other creative applications. But while a lot of people were really inspired by the magic and the visuals that they saw, I was most inspired by how Bot and Dolly created those. And to me, which hopefully you saw from me and Anesa, it was about putting the artist at the center and treating the robot just as another character and sort of a character animation workflow, and really allowing the artist to stay in their environment with access to all the tools that they spent years or decades mastering. So one of our lab's primary research threads is exploring more intuitive ways of controlling robots. And I believe that by Bot and Dolly building a robot programming tool inside of Maya specifically, they made huge strides in that area. And as the story goes, what they were doing was so interesting. Google acquired them. And then shortly after the acquisition, the entity we knew of as Bot and Dolly went dark. And with it, so did their tool. So even though they built this super incredible tool, no one had access to it. So Bot and Dolly obviously had a huge impact on me and the work I do to this day, but I'm not the only one that they inspired. So there were a number of groups in their wake that wanted to do what Bot and Dolly did, but they lacked access to the tools. So some of them started to build their own. And I was one of those people. So this is one of my first prototypes here. The problem was we were all making the same tool. And one major theme that our lab has continued to see in the robotics field is people building the same tools over and over and over. And it's not because they want to, it's because they lack access to tools that have already been created before. So we saw an opportunity to fight that trend. So in 2018, we released Mimic. Mimic is a free open source plugin for Autodesk Maya that provides intuitive animation-based tools for programming industrial robots. So our philosophy is basically, by making it free, we're giving access to anyone who wants it, sort of a rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation. By making it open source, we're enabling people to modify it, build on it, and contribute back to a larger community of users, which we have all over the world at this point, so that it can continue to grow. And by building Mimic into Maya, anyone who can animate in Maya can program a robot. And I assure you, there are way more animators than there are traditionally trained roboticists. So basically, if you can take a 15-minute YouTube tutorial on how to animate Maya, you can program a robot. And then with that, again, you get all the tools that have already been built over years and years and years for animation and visual effects workflows. So I want to share just a few examples of introduce you to some of our users. I only have time for two, unfortunately, but they're both awesome. So first is John Nieris, and John is one of our earliest, if not the first, Mimic users. So right before we released Mimic, John had partnered with a modest production studio in LA called Steam Stage. They do a lot of little commercial shoots, a lot of toys, tabletop stuff as well. And they had bought a small robot, but they didn't have a good way to program it. And for a little bit of perspective, this robot here that you see costs less than the camera that's on it. So this is a KUKA Agilis, which is essentially an off-the-shelf robot made by KUKA that you might find in a factory putting electronics together or something like that. So here you see John holding what's called the Teach pendant, which is a really arcane way of programming robots manually that is still the predominant way that robots are programmed to this day. So John was one of those people that was also inspired by Bot and Dolly. So he knew there had to be a better tool out there that he could use. So he looked around, just couldn't find anything that perfectly suited his needs and then the needs of the studio. So like others, they sort of decided like, okay, I guess we're gonna have to build our own thing. And then luck would have it, we released Mimic, and then sort of as John was looking, and then about a week after we released Mimic, John stumbled on it and found us. And within a week of that, they were already starting to use it on commercial projects. So here's one of the first spots John and Steam did with Mimic and their little robot. So it's a little Mezcal commercial. So basically the workflow is, like you saw, honestly, with some of the gravity stuff. First, the camera gets animated in Maya, the robot goes along for the ride. You have little visual cues here, so you can see, as the robot approaches one of its physical limits, it lights up red, so they know, okay, the robot's getting close to something it can't do. And this is pretty much a previs sort of workflow where you can work with the director and DP to make sure everything is what you want it before you get on set, with the added benefit that now you can just write, your robot program directly from here, and then basically play it back on the robot over and over and over until you get the perfect take. And in this case, they actually, one of the benefits of the motion controls you've seen is it's precise enough where you can use it to do multiple passes and stitch together takes and things like that. So here they actually stitch together 2 takes to get the mirrored bartender that you saw at the end of the commercial. So here you have a small studio with just a few people who can basically use now the same workflow that the big guys used on Gravity. So it's letting them do more complicated camera setups with more intricate motion in a shorter amount of time than it takes to do a lot of traditional camera setups. And one thing I love about John is he's always experimenting with workflows and trying to combine Mimic with other tools that are kind of part of that content creation pipeline. So here's one where he basically had a Vive controller and he was flying this airplane in Unreal, sent that animation over to Maya and Mimic and just kind of parented the robot to the airplane and did some, use some of Maya's like curve smoothing tools to make sure the robot was happy, and then send it over to the robot. And you can sort of imagine also, this background here becoming, live background with LED panels and things like that. You can see how a lot of these things can start to converge. And the other thing I love about John's work is he's always trying to find ways of making the motion control feel less robotic, which you can see here, and also in my next example. So this is a project we actually did together in our lab where we wanted to show something really smooth and organic, but also that benefited from using robots. We had also just finished working with Red Rock Micro, who makes all sorts of camera peripherals, and they have this really cool focus iris zoom system that we had integrated into Mimic so that you could program your phys motors live from Maya while you program the robot. So we wanted to show something that had really shallow depth of field that relied on really subtle focus pulls, but also was super repeatable, so we could stack shots together. Because we actually did 5 different lighting passes on this, and John comped them together so that everything, we needed everything to be perfectly synced for that comping process. This object, by the way, is a 3D printed artifact that our brand team created. That's actually uses the splash screen for Autodesk Inventor when you open it. So here's a workflow again. So animate in Maya, you can see exactly what the robots are going to do. In this case, we actually we have a second robot in the lab that we put basically a 4x4 black panel on, so that we can move it and have like a moving background, so that no matter where the lens was pointing, we got a nice clean black background, so we don't have to do any roto work and things like that. And then here is quick breakdown of some of the different passes. And so the last team I want to introduce you to is Aatv, which is a small studio based in Zurich. Again, just two people. And their work explores what they call the practice of non-industrial robotics. They've been doing experimental robotics projects and installations for years, but last year they started a motion control service called Superposition, specifically for the film industry, based in Zurich, and they added Mimic to the workflow. So the example I want to share from them is this music video that they released at the end of last year for again, a Swiss-based artist named Lil Bruzy. And every shot in this video was done with a robot mounted either on top of or inside of this car here. I'll let this play for just a few more seconds. This next shot here, for instance, was done with a robot mounted inside to the roof of the car. And here's what that looks like from the outside to give you a sense of kind of how tight of a space they were working with this robot and how intricate the work was. So to pull this off, they designed a mount where they could key the robot into any one of 6 positions, 3 on the top of the car and 3 inside the car. So left, right, middle, top and bottom, or top and inside. Here's a better look at the exterior mount, for instance. This particular robot is called a UR10. It's made by Universal Robots. It's a newer category of robots called collaborative robots that are designed to be used around humans, essentially, because they have built-in sensors that can detect collisions and stop if they hit anything. So we're seeing these being used a lot more in past few years. So for the programming, they laser scanned the entire car and brought it into Maya. And then they animated the camera as one continuous path in and around the car. And then what this let them do is pick the best mounting position for each part of the path where they needed to put the robot. And they were, looking for the best location for the kinematics of the robot to be sort of ideal, make sure that the robot can do that particular shot, and then so that the robot wouldn't collide with either the car or the actors inside the car. So to me, that would sort of be enough on its own to prove the value of the workflow. But my favorite part is actually this right here, because they have the scan and the mount in Maya as the ground truth, and the robot itself is so accurate, they're able to hand off the camera between different mounting locations and then stitch together the final shots to kind of sell that continuous camera movement. So here's that technique in action. So you have currently the robot is inside the car, mounted to the roof, and then right there it transitions, and now it's a second shot done with the robot mounted to the top of the car, and then the camera continues around. Here's what that animation looks like. The handoff, and then around. One last quick one. Again, camera mounted inside, out the window. Here's the transition. Now it's robot mounted to the top of the car. And then again, the animation. So obligatory side of robots on a factory line. I think one common theme that I love seeing through all the presentations is that in general there's a lot of anxiety around robots and automation displacing humans, a lot of which is well founded, especially in the manufacturing field. But I think what we've seen through all these presentations is sort of a brighter future where kind of a new breed of technically literate creatives have access to intuitive design tools that let them do more than they were capable of before, and to better express their creativity and to do it with less technical barriers. So with that, if you want to learn more about Mimic or reach out to me, I have some contact info on mimicformaya.com.